So if you find yourself wanting new and different challenges, problems, projects, etc., on the regular, that's also a good sign that you might be a good candidate for a sales engineer.
The Tony Moze Podcast.
Hello, everybody. You have reached the Tony Moze audio podcast, where in this segment, I interview tech professionals of all levels in marketing, sales, pre and post sales on their journeys, hoping to inspire you to make the transition from your previous career and into the tech world. This is the audio version. However, you can also follow me on other outlets, including LinkedIn at Anthony Palmozzi, Twitter at Palmozzi, and YouTube at Tony Moze, where I provide you a different angle from my experiences as a former psychology worker and military veteran turned tech professional. Today's guest is known around the pre-sales industry. He started his career as a software developer, switched over to pre-sales, worked his way up the ranks, and became both a sales and pre-sales leader. And today, he is the man that helps professionals and companies in their sales and pre-sales efforts. His name is Chris White, and he is the author of the book, The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers, and founder of Tech Advisors, which empowers technical sales and pre-sales teams to perform better in the field and achieve greater results through training, coaching, and consulting. Chris White, also known as the Demo Doctor, has 30 plus years of experience in technical sales and consulting, having given and observed literally hundreds and thousands of software demonstrations during his career. He openly shares his experience with others and tells countless stories from the field. So without further ado, if you want the details, listen to this podcast from professionals in pre-sales.
The Tony Moze Podcast.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on this show today.
Tony, my pleasure. It's good to see you.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I want to talk about a few things. I want to, talk a little bit about yourself, how you got into where you are today. You started, you came from a certain place doing something, then you were doing some sales, pre-sales. I mean, just talk to us, just let people know, like, what was the trajectory? How did it start? Where are you today?
Yeah. I was in college. I was in IT, or in the IT field. I was a software engineer, and I never thought I'd get into sales. when I graduated from university, and look, it was quite a few years ago. It was the early 90s when I graduated from university. My first job was as a software engineer, writing CICS and COBOL and DB2 technologies that your audience may not have ever heard of. And I was in the IT profession for 15 years. I was an IT consultant doing enterprise architecture and data architecture. It's interesting, Tony. I was 15 years into my career doing exactly what I thought it was that I wanted to be doing, making very good money, and I was miserable in my job. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And I went through a professional career counseling program. And the gentleman that I worked with, who, by the way, is still a friend of mine today, said, Chris, there's nothing wrong with you. You've just got a number of skills and talents that need an outlet. And that's when I discovered this idea of pre-sales engineering or sales engineering. And I had sat through presentations and demonstrations from software companies, and I saw that there was usually a salesperson, a sales professional, and someone who looked like the technologist or the engineer then giving the demonstration. And I'd always thought, gee, I bet I'd be good at that, because I loved giving presentations. I actually did some teaching. Anyway, long story short, I managed to land my first job as a sales engineer. At the time, we were called application engineers. And, what's funny, Tony, is I thought I was going to be brilliant because I could move a mouse and talk at the same time. I found out very quickly that there was a lot more to this profession than just being good in front of an audience. And look, man, I took my lumps when I first got into the profession. I struggled. I made some mistakes. I figured it out. Did very, very well. Ended up becoming the number one sales engineer, within that sort of line of business. Did that for about 5 years, and then got into management. And when I took over a team of sales engineers, discovered that many of the folks that I had inherited were making many of the same mistakes that I had made when I first entered the profession. And this was 2010. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of training out there. So I literally created a training program for my team. And fast forward about 8 years after that, and I had a couple of different roles, which I'm happy to talk more about. And along the journey, I'd given this same training to countless other teams. And I had a lot of people say to me, Chris, have you ever thought about writing a book? Like, this is pretty good. I published the book in June of 2019, so just over 3 years ago. Shortly thereafter, I launched the business full-time. I went full-time and got into sales training. And here I am now running a sales training organization, primarily helping sales engineers and software sales teams, hone their craft and perform out in the field. So, in any event, that was my journey. And look, I never thought, like I said, to me, sales was below me. Like I'm an engineer. I'm not a sales professional.
Yeah. No, that's really, really cool to hear that. What I heard you say just before, you were talking about training. And then also getting to this point of like, kind of like you got to this area where you were like, you know what, like, I know I'm not the best at this moment. And I know there's some things that I have gaps that I need to work on. I have my weaknesses and I want to improve on it. And, the thing that, maybe beginning or even people who even talk to me who are even considering this role of pre-sales is the idea of imposter syndrome, for everyone. I've different walks of life come in and ask me whether they're older, younger, this background, that background. They're asking me, hey, this looks really interesting, but I just don't know if I'd be a good fit. Sometimes they may have brushed shoulders with a recruiter or two that may have said something to them, but like, what would be those traits that someone needs initially to be able to get into this field?
Yeah, it's actually a really, really good question. And even before I go there, I mean, you mentioned imposter syndrome. I think all of us suffer from imposter syndrome at different points in our career and frankly at different points in our lives. I mean, from time to time, I still struggle with imposter syndrome, and it to a certain degree it depends on the stage that I'm on. It depends on, maybe the group that I'm dealing with. So, and sometimes we just have to believe in ourselves. But to answer your question about the traits, I think there are a couple, and in no particular order, by the way. I think problem solving is certainly a big one. You have to be someone that loves a challenge and loves to sort of roll up your sleeves and figure things out. That's certainly one. You have to be a people person. You have to be, and this is one of the reasons why I knew I had to do something else or different with my career. I was spending probably 80 to 85% of my working days, sitting in front of a computer, working on either architectures or designs or something like that. And I just knew for me that just wasn't me. I'm outgoing. I'm extroverted. I love being around people. So I knew that I had to change. So I think you've got to enjoy interacting with and engaging with people. I think you've got to enjoy taking the stage. I think you've got to enjoy presenting to people and presenting delivering the message. One of the things that I love doing is not only presenting, but explaining things to people and having sort of the lights turn on, right? Trying to think if there's anything else. If you find yourself the thing about when I was a consultant, when I was an IT consultant, the thing about consulting that I disliked the most was I would land with a new client and be really excited and enthusiastic for the first 2 or 3 months. And during that time, I would seek out as many problems as I could solve and tackle the biggest challenges and would help them figure out and make some significant changes. And then at that point, I was ready to move on. But the customer wanted me to stay right there. And now that you figured it out, now just turn the crank. I wasn't a turn the crank guy. I wanted something new and different. If you like showing up every day or every week, knowing that this is what you're going to do today, these are the challenges, these are the expectations, right? And you like the sort of the known, sales engineering may not be for you. But if that bores you to death, or if that feels like a jail sentence, which it did for me, sales engineering might be a good thing. So let me summarize. So in no particular order, I think you need to be a problem solver. Mm-hmm. I think you need to be a people person. I think you need to love presenting. You need to love having an audience. And I think you need to crave a dynamic working environment and a dynamic set of challenges, problems, projects, scenarios, people, etc. If those sound appealing and interesting to you, sales engineering might be a good fit.
It's awesome. So hearing you, seeing you count that actually was leading me into the next idea or question. But you have the 6 habits of highly effective sales engineers. But what you were just saying before, would those be considered pre-habits?
It's actually a good question. I would say that those might be prerequisites or sort of indicators, right? That you might in fact be, a good candidate for sales engineering. And more importantly, that this profession might be a good and satisfying profession for you. And to me, and I mean, look, Tony, you've relatively, recently, landed, in a pre-sales role. For those of us who are ideally wired for this role, the second we land here, we find ourselves saying, oh my gosh, I get paid to do this. Like, I get paid to hear somebody's challenges and put together a few ideas on how they could solve them and then present them back to them. And then I get to go do that for the next group. Like, oh my gosh, like, sign me up, So yeah, I think that's a good fit.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So these prerequisites here, I mean, it leads into, of course, without getting into the book. I mean, obviously I want people to read this book. All my peers, the people who are, already starting their career, those who are getting out of the Pre-Sales Academy by Pre-Sales Collective, all the people that I've been networking with, if you're watching this video right now, especially those who don't even know me or just started looking at this podcast, you need to get this book if you're starting your career in pre-sales, even just sales. I mean, I think this is super important. It's a very good book to read. So, you have 6 habits. You have them all as P's, right? So partner, probe, prepare, practice, perform, perfect, just to boil it all down. What, if you were to put it all in a pot, like what led you to these habits specifically? Like, why these specifically?
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a good question. Tony, I tell people, I didn't really, to a certain degree, I didn't really come up with or find the 6 habits. The 6 habits found me. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? For anybody who's been in this profession for any length of time, when they hear of the 6 habits, they read the 6 habits, they recognize it as it's just ground truth. It's just these are just universal truths about our profession and the fundamentals of what makes us successful. And I look, all I did was I slapped some clever words around these universal truths, and I created an easy to remember framework. But the first habit, to partner with our sales counterparts, for most of us in this profession, we don't do anything outside the context of the relationship and partnership with our sales counterparts, right? It's the account executives that are inviting us into a discovery conversation, or inviting us in to give a demonstration or present to a client or meet with a client, and building that relationship, recognizing that as a partnership. And as I like to say in the book, sales is a team sport. It's just ground truth. And it's, some people call it sort of a marriage. It is. It's a marriage, and we have to appreciate and acknowledge that we don't do anything. It's sort of like a baseball team, right? We keep track of individual stats. We all have our individual role, but if you and I are on the same team and you're the pitcher and I'm the outfielder, and at the end of the game, we've scored fewer runs than the other team, did you win and I lose? No, of course, it's preposterous. We're on the same team, and we just need to recognize that. And it's so easy. It's so easy for people, particularly when you first enter this role. And look, I'm the first one to raise my hand. We have a pretty big ego. We're the smart, we're the smart people in the room. We're the experts, and we're the ones that everybody's looking to deliver that expertise. It's easy for us to think very individually, but we have to think as a team and recognize that it's a partnership. So I'll pause there just for a moment. Tony, that's certainly where, sort of overarching, the 6 habits are. I just discovered that they're ground truth. And the first one I discovered was that at the end of the day, we can't do anything without operating as a team.
Yeah, no, that's good. Sometimes there's like misconceptions, right? There's things that we have to debunk because sometimes the word is out there that the SE, the pre-sales person, is the lone wolf. They're by themselves. They're an island. Also, the whole notion that, since it's the salesperson's deal, that the pre-sales, or the sales engineer is the servant to the salesperson. Right. You've heard about those talks, right? Like, the debate between, like, is an SE a servant to this salesperson, or are they actually equal? And also the SE, is the SE just this individual that they describe as the lone wolf, or is he or she more resourceful than just that title is? There's just a lot of these things that they bring out there.
Well, and I don't want to. I know we didn't want to get too sort of technical, but I heard it said once, and it's become one of my many favorite sayings in our space. But one of the SE leaders that I worked with a few years ago, he said, "Chris, I call it the 51-49 rule." I said, "Really? What's the 51-49?" He said, we have an equal seat at the table. We have an equal vote, except our AE gets the final vote. They have 51% of the vote. We have 49% of the vote. And I always used to say that, like, look, I'm going to take my stand. I'm going to take a stance. I'll share with you my position on, how best to engage with this customer, how best to approach this sales opportunity. But I always said, but you get the final vote, because at the end of the day, it's your neck on the line if we don't close this deal, not necessarily mine. You own the opportunity. I'm here to serve. That being said, it shouldn't be an 80-20, right? Like, I'm not here to just do whatever you tell me to do in that sort of that servant, sort of relationship. So the 51-49 rule.
Yeah, that's cool. So, for people listening, and also to inform you, Chris, like, I love everything within go-to-market, like everything, like from marketing, sales, pre-sales, post-sales, everything within inside of post-sales, implementation, integration. I value all that. And so, of course, for me, it's initially just bringing awareness into tech. But of course, I do believe, like, out of all the areas, sales, pre-sales is just my sweet area that I believe in.
Yeah.
So, with your experiences, or at least what you've seen out there, for those who are in sales or pre-sales, how often than not do you see a salesperson go into being a sales engineer versus a sales engineer going into the sales? Like, what kind of ratio percentage is that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'd say I see more sales engineers moving on to become sales professionals than I see in the other direction. But I do see both, which the first time, and Tony, you know this, I run, I run sales training workshops. In fact, in 2021, I ran over 50 sales training workshops. So I work with lots of organizations and lots of individuals. And I think the very first time that I heard of an SE who had been an AE and decided to make the jump, I was a little caught off guard by that, because you don't hear of that as often. But I've met a number of people since then who have. I think the number one reason is because they have said, I am so tired of having everything that I say be questioned by the client or the prospect because I'm in sales. And as a sales engineer, we are given a certain amount of credibility, a certain amount of benefit of the doubt, because we're not the slimy salesperson, right? And we're at least perceived to be a little bit more neutral because we're the technical party. So that being said, I know a number of very successful account executives that started as sales engineers and realized that they were more, to be very frank and very candid, they were more driven by the financial benefits of being the account executive, and they had the skill set to go along with it. One of the mistakes I've seen a number of sales engineers make is they get allured to the account executive role because of the money, and they realize once they get there that they don't actually have the skills required to be successful on that side, and they come back to pre-sales.
Wow, that's super interesting. I had a question. I think I'll have to ask that after this one. But like, I'm looking like forward thinking. Some people could look at their trajectory of where they ultimately want to be. I know you're a business owner now. You also are, you work internally as an executive. You work with executives. I mean, this whole idea. Would the best path for someone who wants to be an executive at some company be straight from sales? I mean, how many of those people have you seen? Like, would that be like a smart trajectory for them to go, sales engineer, then sales, then to becoming like a CRO or CEO?
Well, so maybe I'll say maybe. I do think that, and I don't know if any studies have proven this. In fact, I'd love to do this study someday. But I've met a number of C-level executives who have sales engineering in their path, in their past, right? At some point in their career path. Why? Because as a sales engineer, we have to both understand the technology and the products, but we also have to understand sales, and we have to be good at dealing with people, right? So in fact, I mean, I run a tech sales advice LinkedIn Live. I interviewed a gentleman who's the COO of a company called, and I'm drawing a blank, I think it's Schmoop. But he was a sales engineer, and he talked about the 5 or 6 skills that he picked up as a sales engineer that have benefited him as a COO. That being said, I will say this. I've seen some very, very successful sales professionals moved into CEO roles and not do very well. because as a CEO, I mean, you always have to be selling the business, but you also have to have other skills as a CEO other than sales. And I've seen a few individuals fail as CEOs because all they could do is sell. And there you need to be able to do more than sell as a CEO. So anyway, for what it's worth, does pre-sales help build the skills that you will leverage at the C level? I believe yes, but sales doesn't always equal CEO.
Interesting. And what about CTO? Because I think of that as a more like even more technical area, but like, what about going into that from pre-sales?
Yeah, it's a good question that frankly I'm not sure I'm the most qualified to answer. I would imagine that some of the more technical sales engineers I could see making very good CTOs, but depending on the organization, they might need a CTO that really is a roll up the sleeves, sort of business-minded CTO, and sales a sales engineering background may or may not help. So, that's an interesting question.
Interesting. So going into this though, because I've eavesdropped in on a couple executives and their plans for doing certain things, but what are your thoughts about account executives and sales engineers for tech companies, right? Like this idea of, do you think the account executive might become obsolete, or will there be a demand for account executives to be more technical than ever in the years to come?
Again, it's a really good question, Tony. I don't think. Let me answer it this way. I don't think individuals in the sales process will ever become completely and totally obsolete, period. There will always be a need for what we understand now as account executives. Now, might account executives need to become a little bit, and I use the term technical very carefully. I'm going to use a different word. Subject matter expertise, subject matter experts. I think the days of being, and this is meant, by no offense to any sales professional out there, but there was the term back in the day when we actually used to wear suits. There was the term the empty suit sales engineer, right? They look and dress nicely and they shake hands and know how to work a room, but that's about the days for professionals like that are gone, or will be at some point. I think customers are looking for sales professionals who have some expertise and can help them solve problems in ways that they can't or don't know how to. And I do believe that account executives still need to be able to, they need enough expertise to be able to help customers through the journeys that they're on. So, and I do think that that's a slightly different role than the sales engineer. That's my personal opinion. And here's the thing. One of the biggest differences between a sales professional, an account executive, and a sales engineer, the account executives are responsible for initiating the conversation. They are responsible for prospecting, opening new doors, knocking on doors, and they have very specific skills for doing that, and they're very comfortable doing that. Sales engineers, we're usually not very comfortable doing that. We like to be invited into the party. We like to be invited in and introduced as the expert, right? We like to be placed on a pedestal. You're always going to need people that can open the door, right, and initiate a relationship, and those that can come in and speak as the foremost expert. So I think we're always going to need people with both skills.
I knew of a VP of pre-sales, VP of solutions engineering. He said he wanted to get rid of sales engineers doing demos and making them pre-recorded. Do you think like moving forward, do you think this is a good business idea for just many businesses to have their pre-sales people just give out pre-recorded demos? I mean, like, what do you think? Do you think this is possible? Like, what are your overall thoughts about demos, pre-demo, or just canned demos, all that stuff?
Yeah, I think the most important context in order to answer this question effectively is to understand that not all demos are created equally. There's actually, the industry is starting to standardize on 6 demo types. And I can't rattle them off to you, but there's the introductory demo, the qualifying demo, the micro demo, and then there's the deep dive technical demo, maybe the FAQ demo, and maybe one other kind. The first 3 that I mentioned, they can quite happily be automated. They can quite happily be recordings that we can send ahead to our clients, but you're never going to have all of your demos automated. You are always going to need sales engineers that can give highly customized, highly focused, deep dive demonstrations of your solutions for very specific scenarios. That's my opinion.
Okay, so how about in terms of the whole demo type, right? You spoke with John Moore about demos being an MVD, or a minimal viable demo. So this is a crazy paradigm shift for me, because I've always learned that when a startup or company develops a product, they should care about an MVP, a minimal viable product, which in my definition means that the product is good enough for businesses and consumers to use and go from there. So, go from there using it. Go from there with making any custom changes or ask questions that are bespoke, customized to them. But you're talking about MVD, right? So why is having a minimal viable demo so important?
Yeah. So often when sales engineers are invited in to give a demo, a couple things happen. First of all, we love showing how smart we are. And we love demonstrating our own expertise. And what's one of the ways in which we can do that? By showing how well we know the product and all the things that we can do. We also love showing all the things that the product can do. Oh, let me show you, and we could do this, and we could do this, we could do this, we do blah, 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 right? And it's too much for most prospects and customers, right? And the truth is, and I tell this to people, and Tony, you've heard me say this before. It's what I call the golden rule of selling technology. He or she who buys a shovel doesn't want a shovel. They want a hole. But they don't just want a hole. They want a fence or a tree. But they don't just want a fence or a tree. They want privacy or shade or fruit or flowers. Yet we show up and we want to talk about the shiny shovel and how wonderful the blade is and the handle and the strength and how it's made and all that stuff. And people just don't care. It's just too much, right? So we show up now with our product and we want to call attention to all these things. And people walk out of, how many times have people, I'll invite your listeners to consider, how many times have you walked out of a demo and your head was spinning and you're asking yourself, I have no idea what that person was talking about. I have no idea how it actually applies to us. And it was honestly not the best use of my time. We need to learn. And here's the thing, less is more. And this is what I tell, and I get this question all the time. Chris, I'm preparing for a demo. How do I know when the demo is ready? Because I just feel like there's always more things that I can throw into the demo. Like I could show them this and I could show them this and I could show them this. My answer is you're asking the wrong question, or you've got the equation wrong. The demo isn't ready when there's nothing else you can add. The demo is ready when there's nothing else you can remove without losing the core essence of the message and of the story. We need to think in terms of less, not more. That's the idea behind the MVD, the minimum viable demo. Pick the 1 or 2 or 3 most compelling capabilities or most impressive parts of the solution. that align with what they're trying to do, and demonstrate it for them in the context of a story, of a simple, easy to understand story. If they're not impressed by that, and or they don't understand what you've just shown them and how that can benefit them, nothing else will. So save yourself some time and save them the time. That's the idea behind the MVD. Does that resonate, Tony?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. That's good. Yeah, it's something to remember because people want to show how cool their product is. I want to show you this, like, because they think more equals more value. There's this economy of things, right? Like, if I add more of this, it's going to get them to value this even more. It's just like, no, sometimes it's just tuning them out.
Exactly. Well, and I'm sure, even before you were a sales engineer, I'm sure at times you were invited to go in and maybe deliver a presentation. How many times have you sat through a presentation where it's like 35 slides and everybody in the audience like, oh my gosh, please, as opposed to the presentation that's maybe 5 or 6 slides, and the presenter has a very clear and concise message, a very compelling message, and when it's over, you're looking for more.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what we want our customers our prospects doing. Right. We want them looking for. So, one of the other analogies that I use, think movie trailer, right? Just give the movie trailer version of your product. And if they like it, they're going to let you know, like, that looks, that looks pretty good. We need to take a closer look at that.
So, you talked about the shovel, and I'm glad that you went into that. He who wants the shovel, actually wants this. Putting that all together, that story, like, what does that liner, what does that, that thing say about human nature?
Oh my goodness, what does that say about human nature? Here's what I think it says about human nature. I think we all default to self. And what do I mean by that? I'm here to demonstrate my product for you. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to tell you about my product and hope that you understand how it applies to you, rather than flipping the script and asking myself, if I were you, if I were in your shoes, what might I be concerned about? What can I say that's actually going to be meaningful to them, not to me? It's natural for us all to default to self. And Tony, I'm going to give you and your audience a perfect example of this. If I were to show you a picture of you and your organization, whose picture are you looking for first?
Who's going to say me?
Of course, we all do. If you're with family and you're looking at old pictures, who are you looking for in all the pictures? Yourself, and everybody else is as well. By the way, it doesn't mean we're bad people. It doesn't mean we're self-centered. Your question was, what does the shovel analogy, what does that mean about human nature?
Yeah.
It's just a reminder that we all default to self. And because we all default to self, we actually have to make a conscious decision to be, quote, others centered. We have to make a conscious decision to be others first. Mm-hmm. And what does this mean in the context of our roles? We have to make a conscious decision to consider our customer first. What are they going to care about? Now, over what do I want to show? Yeah. That's what I think it indicates about human nature.
It's awesome. So your book, you've written the book, The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers, which is not only published in English, but how many other languages?
So we have a Spanish version, a French version, and a German version, and a Chinese and Japanese versions are underway.
Wow. That's awesome. That's good. Yeah, no, that's great. That's good to know. So yeah, perfect.
Well, and if I may, I am inspired to just mention that the gentleman, and it was 4 gentlemen, and in fact, a 5th gentleman now is working on the Chinese and Japanese versions. They all did it, and we agreed to split the proceeds of the sale of those books. But look, I'm here to, unless your name is Daniel Pink or some other Seth Gogan, nobody's making a fortune on selling books, right? These guys volunteered. They were so inspired by the book that they volunteered their time to translate the book, and that is just, to me, that's a testament to them as professionals and the content. So I feel very, very blessed and privileged to have people in the community invest their time to do that.
Yeah, the fact that it's gone into now potentially 5 different languages shows that 5 different types of groups have valued this book.
Yeah.
This is super cool. You were talking about Daniel Pink and, of course, a couple other authors that are out there, of course, that are crushing it. And I know you've read the book, Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yep. Great book. I just got to put this in as a theme. What were the 6 books you were reading before you wrote this book?
That is another good question. So, and I'll answer a slightly different. I'll answer a slightly different question, or very similar. What are the books that inspired me along the journey? And in particular with this book. So one of the books that inspired the writing of my book is a book called Who, WHO. And the premise of this book is that organizations don't have a what problem, they have a who problem, meaning they need to do a better job of hiring the right people. And it's really a book about how do you hire A players. But the reason this was an inspiration for me was the way in which that book was written. That book was written in an infinitely consumable manner. It was very conversational. And when and ironically, I am not the biggest reader in the world. And if I pick up a book and it's not easy for me to read, I just, even if it's good material, if it's not easy to read, I just put it down because it has a hard time capturing my attention. And the book Who, in addition to being a very good book, it was very easy to read. I wrote my book modeled after that formula, that approach. And that's why, you've read the book. It's a very easy read because it's very conversational. People who know me well tell me often, honestly, Chris, I feel like I'm just having a conversation with you. Like I can hear these words coming out of your mouth. So anyway, so that's one of the books. Other books that influenced me, The Speed of Trust, which is another one it's actually by Stephen, I believe it's Stephen R. Covey, who's Stephen Covey's son. Mm-hmm. That book literally changed my life. There's a book called Instant Influence, and I'm drawing a blank as to what the author's name is, but Instant Influence is a brilliant book. If you haven't read that, folks, go out and read it. Another book that literally changed the sort of, just the way I thought about the world is, and now I'm drawing a blank. The Millionaire Messenger is one by, I think his name is Brendan Burchard. He inspired me. And then I mentioned Seth Godin. There's a book called Tribes. That book inspired me as well. I also mentioned Daniel Pink, and I think I mentioned there's a book called Drive. There's 2 books by Daniel Pink. Drive. I think I even referenced Drive in the book. But after I published mine, Daniel Pink published To Sell is Human. Mm-hmm. And that's another book that I can't recommend highly enough. So anyway, there's a few, of the book inspirations that I've had in recent years.
That's great. So, I know we already talked about your book. This already exists. Of course, everybody pick this up. now almost going to be in 5 different languages. What other services do you have out there? I mean, that could be for just anybody, whether it's top up, just new in. What kind of services do you have out there, and where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I run a business called Tech Sales Advisors. So people can go to techsalesadvisors.com. We run sales training programs for sales engineer organizations, and for account executives, and for the cross go-to-market team. So many of our workshops are now for AEs and SEs together that walk through the 6 habits. I've also got training for individuals. So I think you've gone through some of the online training that I have. We're actually going through a revision of all of our online training. I have a partner working with me now, and he's working on a program for sales engineer leaders. So, and he's actually working on a 6 habits for pre-sales leaders book. And then otherwise, people can reach out on LinkedIn. And I have my Tech Sales Advice LinkedIn live program. I try to run that on Mondays at noon Eastern time. That's a little bit about what we're doing now and how people can find us.
Again, Chris, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Tony, absolutely my pleasure. And congrats to you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I have provided the information in the description below. If you thought this was valuable, please like, comment, and subscribe. To stay connected with me, you can also find me at LinkedIn by searching for Anthony Moze, and Twitter at Tony_Moze. I want you to envision success to become the best.